Rakesh has been teaching at UCLA for over 30 years, and he won the Ramsey Prize in Decision Analysis in 2009. Some of the work for which he earned that was his work on measurable value function theory with Jim Dyer in multi-attribute decision making, and also work in equity and fairness with Peter Fishburne and also with Robin Keller. I happen to know Rakesh's daughter because I was a resident fellow in an undergraduate dormitory here at Stanford, and as a sophomore she lived in the house. But since then she stayed around Stanford. She finished her degree in computer science, then got a PhD in genetics, an MD, and she's now a resident in dermatology. So she'll figure out another way to hang around Stanford, I'm sure. Okay, but we're delighted to have Rakesh Sarin here.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Happiness is a basic human desire. Happy people tend to be healthier, they live longer, and they have better social relationships. Happy employees are more productive, and happy customers are more loyal, and maybe they buy more of your product. So the question is, how do we become happier? So the key premise of our book and our research over the last 10 years is that happiness is a choice. So regardless of your circumstances, where you are in the world, where you are in your life, we can all improve our happiness. So this quote and the choice aspect will become clearer as I tell you about our theory. But it is best captured in a 5,000 years old Indian philosophy manual. Of course, it was not written then, passed on by oral tradition. And it says, we are what our deep driving desire is. As our deep driving desire is, so is our will. As our will is, so is our deed. As our deed is, so is our destiny. Now, some people think that happiness is more like a pendulum. So some days you are happy and some days you are not. And we can relate to it. And this is called set point theory, treadmill. And a famous scientist once said, trying to be happier is as futile as trying to be taller. Of course, that is not the position we take. We have a different view. We say happiness is more like a sailboat. So wind current and ocean currents do influence happiness, but you have the control of the rudder. And if you don't exercise the control, the sailboat will drift. So that is the position we are going to take. Now, the question is, first let me just back up and say, okay, is this research useful in business applications? And I'm just going to give you one quote from BC Forbes. Forbes, of course, is the Bible of capitalism, the magazine. And the founder in the first issue of Forbes, which is 95 years ago, said the business was originated to create happiness. And we are in danger of forgetting that, right? And in public policy, also recently, 2 weeks ago, there was a conference at the United Nations. Prime Minister of Britain attended that. Many President of Costa Rica attended that. And it was showcasing Bhutan's gross national happiness. So even here in 1968, Robert Kennedy had said that gross national product, a measure of economic output, measures everything except which makes life worth living. So these ideas have been around, but Bhutan is the only country that I know has formulated a plan to measure something other than economic indicator. But David Cameron has started efforts in that direction. President Sarkozy in France assembled a very high-level panel consisting of some Nobel Prize winners to create what he called net national product, basically bring in other measures. So the idea is that we need a balance. Economic progress is very important, but we also need for the citizens' emotional well-being. So happiness research is getting more important. Now, question is, how do we, because it is an engineering approach, first thing is, how do you define happiness, right? So I'm going to start with a simple definition, and later we could talk about some other issue, that to us it is sum total of moment happiness, moment emotion, or state of the mind. So if I ask you, how are you feeling right now? On a 10-point scale, you say 8 or 7 or whatever you are feeling. Sum total of that is the happiness. Now, this is not new. Bentham, over 200 years ago, had said that happiness is sum total of pains and pleasures, and several other philosophers had talked about that. But that time it was not possible to measure. So in engineering approach, you need a definition and you need a reasonable way to measure. Now psychologists and neuroscientists have developed many ways to measure happiness. Millions of data points now are collected. Gallup, for example, each day measures the emotional well-being of randomly selected 1,000 people every single day. But over a year, you get 300,000 observations, right? So you have lots of data on this. And the idea, oh, did I skip that, the slide? Oh, all right. Okay, sorry. Okay, okay. So let me get to the measurement first. But just to make sum total idea, it's just an integration under the curve. The idea is that you have to look at anticipation, the experience, and the recall all together. You see, so this is a skydiving example. Now, skydiving experience itself is just few minutes, and usually that's a panic, right? But you start planning about it, and this is like a happiness seismogram, you could say, is plotted. And then what we do is we basically take the sum total of positive and subtract the negative, right? So integration under the curve. That's going to be our definition. Now, someday, of course, we may be able to construct these seismograms. Right now, we can only approximate this. So now, on the measurement issue, so the dominant method is still simply asking people. So when you look at it in detail, like we have, first we were ourselves very suspicious. How can you measure happiness? But when you look at the ways they have devised, you would be surprised. It's not as accurate as measuring height, but it is not far from, economic indicators are not that precise either. We just think they are. They aren't. There's a lot of error in them. And they are very close to this, the psychologists. The lately neuroimaging, that's a fascinating direction. And the idea here, there is that, so there is this is a guy wearing sensors. So this is neuroscientist Davidson at University of Wisconsin. He measures the brain activity of these monks. But the idea is this: if the left prefrontal cortex is active, I'm cheerful, happy. If right is active, then I'm sad and depressed, right? So the difference of left minus right is a reasonable measure. Now, I won't be surprised that in 5 years, there will be handheld devices that are measuring your cheerfulness. Now, you can just put a chip. I don't mean plant it, but just put a chip, and this is like that guy is wearing sensors, and you can measure happiness. So Davidson has plotted, for example, this kind of curve. So here you are happy, here not so happy. But one good news is most of us are reasonably happy, right? Large number of people. This is a large number of people. So, and he has found, for example, one just finding, that people who meditate, because he goes around taking these measurements for these Buddhist monks, are happier. And so-called senior monks who meditate even more or longer are happier than the junior monks. So, but you know, this is going to take a long time to figure out why, but at least that is the observation. But notice this point. This guy is extremely happy. So when he observed it, that's how he started on this Buddhist monk. So he said, who is this guy? Well, this guy is, I'm going to show you the picture. This guy is Matthew Ricard. He has a PhD in sciences in France, but then became a Buddhist monk. And in his data point, he was the happiest man. So people are beginning to measure happiness using these scientific methods, some bodily measurement, skin conductance, certain kinds of chemical, smiling, all sorts of ways. But really the dominant way, if you were to ask me, is something like this. Did you experience anxiety, stress, sadness, something like that? And you write down, that's a Gallup survey. Or did you experience joy, happiness, questions like that, and then you write it down and they add up these kinds of judgments. So verbal reports is the dominant way so far. Okay, now quickly, what have they found? When they have done surveys like that, there are tons of information. But one thing they found is that this is income per capita. This is some kind of happiness index. That first of all, money is important. Right? Poor countries, people are not so happy. Rich countries, they are happy. But remember, up to a point. Right? Beyond that, for example, USA, we have the highest per capita income, at least in this, but Denmark is happier than the US. The latest survey, this is an older survey, 2011 survey just came out, Denmark is still number one. For some reason, in a variety of surveys, see, we are not the only ones who do survey. Europeans do it, researchers do it. Denmark, for some mysterious reason, is all, in my view, just about always number one. And US barely misses top 10. So we did miss top 10 this time in the Gallup survey. So the idea is money is important, but beyond that, it does not contribute to happiness, right? So that means we have to look for some other factors. The other interesting finding is, and this is a bit of a puzzle, that this is a graph for Japan, that in spite of 5-fold increase in real GDP in 50 years, happiness curve or well-being curve is absolutely flat. Hasn't increased. In the US, the same story. Great Britain, the same story. Would it be the same story in a poor country? No, because there it will improve because their basic needs are not satisfied, right? So this is an interesting kind of puzzle. And then Kahneman and his colleagues did a study with some people. It was published in Science. And this is the activity. So sex rates the highest in happiness, and morning commute is the lowest. Evening commute is a little bit better, right? So they were looking at socializing after work, so friendship, and that is very important for happiness. Okay, so at this point, we want to ask, okay, we want to be happier, then what are the principles that guide happiness? You see, when I say happiness is a choice, it's not about like a thermostat. Let me put myself on a higher level of happiness. No, happiness is a byproduct of decisions we make, choices we make, and then we get a either happier life or not so happy life or whatever. So point is, if that's the case, then what are the principles that guide happiness? So that's where our laws of happiness or the equation of happiness comes in. So here is my editorial opinion before I start talking about these laws, that more I think about it, I feel that's the right way to go. It feels odd that you want to talk about happiness using an equation. But do I believe the equation I'm going to show you? Absolutely not. That's not we are just scratching the surface. Some bright people here will come up with better equation. But it's a better way to think. Otherwise, you see this happiness is such a mysterious thing people make out and everything goes. When you put it in a precise way, now precise way has a disadvantage that you may not be able to capture all aspects, but the aspects you capture, you are at least you will be able to say something concrete that people could agree, disagree. So I feel in time these equations will get revised. So I'm going to spend some time in justifying the laws, because you see, once you have the laws and equation, then you use some kind of mathematical program and answer will come out. So there's not much dispute about that. The dispute should be, or discussion should be, do I agree with these laws? So I'm going to spend some time convincing you that these laws are valid. So the first law of happiness is that happiness is reality minus expectations. The reality may be your job, your salary, your house, your spouse or whatever, minus expectations. So then the question is, what do you mean, where do these expectations come from? Well, expectations come from, one, social comparison. There are three ways expectations are formed. I'm going to talk about just two ways today. The first way is social comparison with our peer group, what I get minus what others get. Right? So for example, some of you may know, this study now has become quite popular, that in Olympics, bronze medalists are happier than silver medalists. How's that possible? The reality, if happiness only depended on reality, silver medal is better than bronze, because silver medalists compare themselves with gold medalists and regret missing out the gold, and bronze medalists are happy to win any medal at all. So it is the comparison that determines happiness. In a Harvard study, students were asked, these are students at Harvard, that you could choose one of the two worlds. In world A, your income is $50,000 and others earn $25,000. In world B, your current yearly income is $100,000, others earn $200,000. Guess what? Large proportion of students chose world A. So people think about these comparisons. Now, these comparisons even have some biological consequence. At UCLA, a study was done with vervet monkeys. And these monkeys have a hierarchy. The dominant monkey had the higher level of neurotransmitter serotonin that is associated with enhanced feelings of well-being. Now, they have found the same thing as the captains of these teams and head of the sororities or whatever, but you can say maybe the animal that has higher serotonin becomes the head. Well, human, we cannot displace people like that, but here we could. So these guys took the dominant monkey, put him in a different cage. His serotonin level dropped. And new monkey became the head and his serotonin level increased. So it seems like we are somewhat wired to make these kinds of comparisons. And our argument would be that you cannot just say, because sometimes people just say, well, then don't compare. It cannot happen. We are wired like that, but you can manage those comparisons, right? You can manage those comparisons. What happens is in our society that because of all this marketing and TV, we are induced to compare in areas where no comparison is needed. It could be looks, wealth, fame, or whatever. And that's kind of a no-ending game, right? Because if you are on the top of the heap on something, then you are happy for a while, but now the heap changes, right? So I think philosopher Russell said it the best. He said that if you desire glory, you will envy Napoleon. But remember, Napoleon envied Caesar, and Caesar envied Alexander, and Alexander envied Hercules, who never existed. So this game you cannot win. So we have to be careful. Psychologist Festinger said, and correctly so, look, comparing with others is the way we evaluate how well we are doing. So it's okay to have some of that, but let's not make it toxic and become excessively obsessive about these comparisons. Okay, now the second way our expectations form is what I got in the past. Now think about a moment. Let's take a very big picture. If our happiness only dependent on the reality part, then we should all sitting here be amazingly happy. Our happiness should be off the chart. You know why? Because compared to our ancestor, we have so much more: running water, electricity, roads, cell phones, right? But we got accustomed to those privileges. That's all this law is saying, that as you get more and more of something, you get adapted to it, and you get accustomed to that privilege. Again, I don't want to overemphasize monkeys. In a separate study, separate place, not at UCLA, people gave these monkeys, they were having customary apples, but they gave them raisins. Maybe raisins are sweeter, they like them more. So their neurons fired rapidly. But guess what happened? After a few days of raisin, activity subsided, right? They got adapted to it. So this is what we see all the time. Now, you can see, this is a little bit of a let's say, my personal thing. So I was an engineering student in India, and the engineering college was located far out of town. And me and my friends, we will go to see movie in the town using a bicycle, not that bicycle, but some bicycle, and we were happy. And then I got a job and I got a scooter. When I came to UCLA to do my PhD, I got an old car. Actually, worse than this, my car occasionally refused to reverse. So you can imagine parking night before, with some probability in the morning it may not reverse. But nevertheless, my girlfriend then married me, and we are married for 30 years. So the secret of happiness, buy a car that doesn't sometimes reverse. No. So now I have a better car. But you see, the point is that you get used to. I cannot go back to bicycle, not in a recreational sense, yes, but as a mode of transportation now. But you get adjusted to that, and you don't derive happiness because of what you have. So with these, let me give you. So far all I have said is that happiness is relative, number one. Number two, it's reality minus shifting expectations, right? So as we work harder to earn more money, buy a bigger house, buy a fancier car, or whatever, our expectations also shift. So for a while we are happy, but then expectations catch up with reality. So that's why it is no wonder that American millionaires living in mega mansions are barely happier than Maasai warriors in Kenya who live in huts. You see, so it's a very interesting issue, the puzzle of happiness. Okay, now in order to use our engineering approach, we have to give it a little bit of structure. Okay, reality minus shifting expectation, but what is the kind of function you are going to use? And I won't talk too much about that, but I'll show you basically, we will assume again there is a finding which says that losses hurt us more. You know, like coaches say that agony of defeat is worse than the thrill of victory. So some coach, I forget who said that. So this is capturing loss aversion, and then there is a diminishing sensitivity, right? So if you win, let's say in office raffle $1,000, you will be happy, but if you won $10,000, you're not going to be 10 times happy, right? So there is a diminishing sensitivity. So with these laws, now we can put together a function. So far, if you think about it, what I've said, I have given you, frankly, a gloomy picture. No matter what you do, your expectation will catch up, and there's not much room to improve happiness. Now I'm going to begin to give you brighter side of this equation. So when people say that happiness doesn't change this or that, I agree if you are reactive. But if you are proactive and plan properly, you have a chance to improve happiness. Okay, now in this particular approach, we will put these laws together, and then the question is, what kind of result do we get? I'm going to talk about satiation. You will see it in the next slide, but I'll talk about it maybe 10 minutes later. But just stay with this, that happiness is now the S-curve of reality minus shifting expectation. Later I'll adjust for satiation. So you get a model like this. Now, so really there are two state variables. My reference level, which depends on what? Which depends on what I got used to, and the social comparison, the peer group comparison, and as I said, the Y, which is the satiation level, I'm going to postpone right now. So what happens with this is that suppose I have to plan my life. What should I do if expectations shift? So you don't need to worry about the theorem. The idea is that your reality should be ahead of your expectation, right? How can we do that? By having an increasing path. So we call it crescendo strategy, less to more, and you can do it on a simple thing such as say a vacation. Suppose you, actually this is a small experiment we did with some friends. So this is a site Krka, and this is a site Plitvice, so in Croatia. Well, So if you, on a small scale in your vacation, instead of doing seeing the spectacular sights first, save them for the last. Simple reordering. You still saw both, but the people who saw Krika first, Krika is less spectacular than the Plitvice. Now, of course, it is individual preference, right? But for most people. People who saw Krika first and then Plitvice enjoyed Krika and enjoyed Plitvice a lot. Amazing, they said. And those who went other way also said Plitvice is amazing, that it doesn't subtract from that. But Krika, they say, oh, Krika was so-so, right? So this idea that you can use, for example, frankly, even in raising children, if you give them too much too fast, these expectations, it's especially a problem with wealthy parents, right? For us, this was not an issue, right? When you have children, your income is also modest at times, so you progress anyway. You can, for example, use it in organizations, say call center service employees. If you give them promotion and given that they attain some milestones and goals, more frequent promotions, then employees will be happier because people like to progress. In fact, one company called Zappos, I read about that, and they do that because their CEO is very much into this happiness literature. So he has designed a procedure like that. But frankly, more important than these vacation or you have to organize, it's a philosophy of life. You have to organize the chapters in your book of life from less to more, right? So here is a more concrete example. So this is it's made up a story of three friends go on a vacation and they are in some Mayan ruins. They pick up a bottle, a genie comes out and gives them 100 coins. These 100 coins they can use for whatever purpose. These three friends are students. They said, we will use it for transportation. So Jack is very excited to rent Porsche. But Porsche costs 4 coins, right? So there are 50 periods, 4 coins. He runs out in period 25. So he's happy. This is adaptation taking place. But now he has to take a bus. So boom, now he's unhappy because he got used to Porsche. And of course, even unhappiness is adaptive, right? You can begin to live with it, but its total utility, so as to say, is minus 105. It seems funny that how can you have a Porsche for a while, it is minus, is because the loss is hurt more, at least in our model. Now, there is this second guy, Frank. He said, look, I know a medium-sized car costs 2 coins, 50 periods it has to last because that's their bet with each other, who can be the happiest. And so he gets that and he is happy. And then, of course, again, he gets used to this car. He has plus 110 happiness. Well, now the third student, Mariah, she's the smartest. She says, I know this game, the expectations shift. So I'm going to start with a modest car, a small compact, then graduate, and then get the Porsche. And she's the happiest, right? So in this case, her total happiness is 145 happy dawns, right? So anyway, you can maximize this function subject to your income constraint, and you will see the optimal is the increasing path. This story is just to give you a little feel that really this is what happens when you go and upgrade things. Then we begin to get used to what we have, and we need something better. Okay. Now, you see, if you look at, let's talk about, let's say, a cell phone I have, right? Now, am I happy because of this cell phone? It's not. It doesn't create any happiness. But if I forget at home and show up here, I don't like it, right? So the idea is that our happiness for this adaptive goods, the liking part becomes very low because you get used to it. But the withdrawal, if you don't have it because you got used to it, that is quite high. And that is true in many marketing goods. Basically wanting, this will be your willingness to pay. If you have a quasi-linear utility function, the wanting or desirability is the willingness to pay. And liking is, of course, what you have minus the reference point, and withdrawal is because you are consuming nothing. I forgot my cell phone, and that was my reference point. It's minus u of minus r, right? So it's driven by the withdrawal. So what happens is, think about it. If you're consuming 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 or something, r will catch up and come close to 1. So liking is tiny, but the withdrawal is very high, right? So that's how these adaptive goods work. And that is why we have to be careful in initiating habits. I'm setting you up for a next idea, which is that there is a price of having too many habits. And you see some parents tell their children not to acquire or orient them so that they don't acquire expensive habits too soon. So now I would bring the satiation. And here is the idea that you would not, suppose I go to a restaurant tonight, right? Now, tell me if during the reception, which is at 4:30, I eat a lot, will I enjoy the restaurant food that much? Probably not, right? Because I already ate a lot. Alternatively, suppose we are having pizza tonight, and I ate pizza yesterday, right? I may not enjoy. So satiation simply means our present consumption influences the future consumption, right? So how this satiation is to be managed is by two factors. If you ate pizza tonight, it's not for everybody. Some people may love pizza every night. I'm not saying that. What you do is, one is the time. Eat pizza a week later or a month later. And second thing, have a variety instead of pizza. So there are two neutralizers of satiation. But you see, satiation and adaptation, they go together. That feels strange first, but let me give you an example. That if I get adapted to spicy food, it takes me much more to get satiated because I got accustomed to that. People, for example, who listen to classical music and got used to it, they can listen for hours, whole day. But people who have not been accustomed to it, they'll get bored in 10 minutes or say opera or something like that, right? So adaptation mitigates satiation. So because of this joint effect, this is what happens, that variety is good. Variety is the spice of life is truth, but not too much variety. So we have a life simplicity theorem, which basically simply says that there is, for each person, it's a different number. So don't ask me what's the number. It's a different number, but there is an optimal number. Too much variety is not good. Some variety is obviously good. And the other effect of satiation is, the good effect of satiation is a person who has a wider interest in things and people, would enjoy more things in life. And the trick is not, okay, so this is a point. It's not the variety itself, it's the novelty and surprise. If you go to, let's say, Hawaii, there's so much greenery there. You don't really see the variety then. Everything is green. But if you go to some rocky hill, even a small amount of flowers, wow, right? So it is the contrast, it's the surprise, it's the novelty. And the idea is that not that we continually have the sensory novelty. That's a recipe for exhaustion. What you want is begin to develop deeper interest. Have you not seen these people who watch birds? To us, all these birds look alike. They can spend a whole day. This bird is different than that. They get so much kick out of it. So variety is to be seeing small things and differences in the small things and appreciating that, right? So there is a, I don't recall exact words, but there is a poet in India, there was Rabindranath Tagore, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature. He said, he basically said that, it's a beautiful poem, but I'm not telling you a poem because I don't remember. It says that I went to see high mountains and I went to see oceans, and he did actually, he traveled, it was well traveled, but I forgot to notice the dewdrop on the ear of the corn in front of his own yard, right? So that's the variety thing, that begin to appreciate these small differences. So I've already talked about this. Now the question is that why don't we normally use crescendo strategy, normally take care of these shifting expectations or satiation, and have a happier life. So Adam Smith said it well, the great source of both the misery and disorders of human life seems to arise from overrating the difference between one permanent situation and another. So what happens is that we are frankly not clueless. We are good. If we know that if service is bad in a restaurant, we will be disappointed, right? And we can forecast that if our income increases, to some degree we will get adapted, right? So our direction is correct, but how fast we get adapted is amazing. There's so much research on this, so much experiments and other things, that our inability to forecast how fast we get adapted to good and bad both is very limited, right? So for example, one very simple experiment is when you're buying for next week now, not for right now, grocery. If you are hungry, you buy more, and if you are full, you buy less. And do you know the difference between hungry and full is one muffin. So they gave bunch of people one muffin before they enter the supermarket, and the other people, and they see the difference in the amount they bought, right? So we are not very good. We react to our present emotion. But look, you can relate to it. After Thanksgiving, you have had just big turkey meal. You say, Christmas, would you like turkey? You say, don't even talk about that, even though Christmas is far away. Our present emotions guide our feeling for future. And so what happens in this case then is that our predicted happiness is future reality minus current expectations. Not quite that bad. In our formulation, we have a bias parameter, pi. So we say, okay, maybe we project halfway or something like that, right? So you can change that. Well, if that is the case, see what will happen. So if you have more and more income, like these lottery winners, you will feel, I'll be wonderfully happy, because you're not able to forecast your adaptation. And this is exactly what they have found with $1 million or more lottery winners, that after a year their happiness resorts to the same level, right, as it was before. They have also found that they begin to enjoy these simple things in life less, right? So there is a thing about the money. So in our model, if you optimize, of course you will be happier, but not with the projection bias. You will think I'll be so much happy, but in reality you will not be that much happy. So here is the red curve is with projection bias. So this is an income. You will think you are so much happy. This is optimal. It's not going to change, but your actual happiness will be less. And further, if projection bias is even more serious, see this? So it will be much bigger gap. So when people reach there, that's why you hear all these well-known actors and actresses that fame is not what it is made out to be. Because when you don't have it, you feel how wonderful it would be. But when you reach there, it's a different thing. Okay, now I may just say a few words. Well, okay, so what we have said is that you could maximize your happiness using some strategies. Beware of this presentism or bias. But really what is in our control is the time, right? How we allocate time. So this model basically says that we ought to be careful about our personal life and professional life, how we allocate the time. And again, there people I don't mean to say every single day you are making, but when important decisions come, you have to be very clear. What is the objective function you are trying to maximize? And I would just quote from Michael Bishop, who was the chancellor of UCSF, but he was talking about somebody else. He was talking about Chandrasekhar, who won the Nobel Prize in astronomy. And he said Chandrasekhar went on to express discontent with his life despite his extraordinarily successful career, regret that he had imposed his obsessional lifestyle on his wife, and chagrin that his life has been so one-sided, so lonely, so inescapable. And he says, it is sobering to hear such discontent from a Nobel laureate whose achievements are so celebrated that his name graces a space satellite, right? So it is not a question of that some people who may not be smart and therefore not think properly, you'll be surprised. You could be a very smart person in your field, but you don't take time to think about these issues. So life balance, to me, I don't mean that you need to use this model. This model simply gives you some idea on structuring it, but I have to take some time and think about that. Now I want to talk about something else. Whenever we look at an equation, me and you are all engineers, we like to maximize. Sometimes it's good just to stare at that equation and say, can I extract happiness out of this equation? Now, if you think for a moment, I said reality minus shifting expectation. Why don't we think that are there goods and activities or experiences for which these expectations don't shift, right? Then you have some chance for happiness there. Well, there are. Think about simplest thing is food, right? Each time I'm hungry, I enjoy the meal, right? So it's different than cell phone. Cell phone, I don't even think about. It has become a necessity. But food, the basic good. So basic good is the way to go. Basic goods are all around it. Not everything is basic good. I cannot make my cell phone into a basic good. It isn't. It is an adaptive good. But they are basic goods, and these basic goods we can divide as the needs of the body, which is like food, shelter, health. Health is extremely important, actually. So that's a separate topic. We will not talk about that. Sex, sleep, those are all basic goods. Then the needs of the mind and the needs of the heart, which are things like spending time with your friends and family, listening to music you love. Basically things that gives you consistent happiness, right? So these basic goods, if we emphasize, then we are extracting happiness because expectations don't shift. And so how do I know what is a basic good? Basic good is not a fixed category which I can give it to you. For you, Sudoku may be a basic good. For me, it isn't. I get bored of Sudoku very quickly. But some people love, right? They want to do that Sudoku every day. So the way to test for basic good is something like that in terms of the idea. If nobody knew I'm buying or experience X, would I still want X? So there's no social comparison, right? More or less. Will I enjoy X in the future, say a year from now or 5 years from now, as much as I do now, right? So that is the basic good. Basically reference levels or expectations level do not move much, and they are not that much subject to social. Now in life, nothing is that clear-cut and precise. A meal has all sorts of components. There is a basic part is simply satisfying hunger, but going to a 3-star Michelin and then telling everybody else, that's a social comparison aspect, right? So it's not that simple, but nevertheless, it's a good way to think about that there are basic goods for which if we emphasize. And see, this is no wonder that there is a study, and I'm not promoting, I'm not very religious, so nevertheless, that's the fact, the data, tremendous amount of data say religious people are happier than non-religious people. But why? When they look at it, and these are people like Putnam at Harvard and Deaton at Princeton, who are very careful research, they found, you know what? Guess what? Church friends. You would say God, love of God, none of that. They control for all that. None of that matters. It is church friends. So because if you think about it in our terminology, that friends are basic goods, spending time with friends. So you could spend time, you don't have to be church, you could be active in your environmental thing or whatever. So you could have friendship, companionship in other ways. Well, the point is church is a natural setting. And then guess what? People who pray, go to church regularly, but do not have church friends are actually less happy, more they are, or I shouldn't use the word dissatisfied, but less satisfied than the average. So people who go to church frequently are happier than non-religious people, but the condition is 85% of the correlation is explained by one thing, which is the church friends. So this is the basic good aspect. So, okay, so we have to be, okay, so now the question comes, all right, what about this issue of meaningfulness in life? So that's a complicated question, but the way we approach it is, what does it mean to say that I have a meaningful life? I have a purpose or a meaningful life. So we are going to use equation even for that, sorry. So all these love, trust, meaning, everything is to be put into an equation. So what we say, let me begin with this parable. It's a well-known parable, that a traveler comes upon some hard at work stonemasons, and he asks, so one guy, let's call him John, says, I'm building a wall. He asks Paul. Paul says, I'm building a cathedral. You see, Paul sees more meaning and purpose in life. So our definition is that reality is not one truth out there. Reality is constructed in our mind. And if you see the reality in a cumulative way, we call it cumulative good, like as if think of a metaphorical bucket. Paul's efforts are getting stored in the bucket, right? So your bucket increases over time. It could be, that's why people say when you set a goal, whatever goal it is, it could be losing weight, it could be contributing to an environmental cause or to a charity or whatever. You set a goal and make a progress towards that, you are happy because it's cumulative, right? It's a cumulative thing. So the cumulative goods are the source of happiness, and again, cumulative good is a very good way to convert adaptive goods into basic goods. It's a trick, but it's not a trick in the sense that you have to have a proper mental training and begin to see some. You see, taking care of children, people have found, if you have children or when you have children, you will find out it's quite stressful. But if you are raising a family, you view it this way. That doesn't mean the occasional hassles are going to be less, but you will be more tempered, you will be more calm, that these periods we have to get over because I'm trying to raise the family. So in a cumulative good, reality is sum total of what you have achieved. Simplest example is, if this seems too confusing, learning a language. I learned, let's say you are learning Greek, so 5 words each day or whatever is your goal. 5 words next day, someday 3, someday 4. But total is what counts, right, in the learning the language. So it is cumulative by design, but many other things in life can have that cumulative structure if we think that way, much like Paul, who thought that he's building a cathedral, but what Paul is doing, also building a wall, sending a stone, digging a foundation, but in his mind he is building a cathedral. So this cumulative good, something amazing happens. Think about this way. So you have x constant, right? What happens? X. In an adaptive good, your reference point or expectation comes close to x. No more happiness. But what happens in cumulative good? Because it is cumulative x, 2x, 3x like that, a constant consumption, a constant devotion to something, these reality and expectation, they become lines that increase in parallel, and there is always a gap between that, right? So that's a mathematical result, but also it kind of makes sense because you are looking at not day by day, because day by day fluctuations will be there, and frankly your mind will drift to that. But if you have that purpose in mind, you'll say, hey, relax, I'm halfway through building this cathedral, so what, today the wall I built yesterday fell away, because of rain or whatever, but so what, I'm halfway through that. So the cumulative way is a good way to think about that. Okay, so at this point, we are there. So the summary, you see, I found in decision analysis that personally to me, the biggest help is not doing all these utility, that may be important, the thinking that this real life situation, whether it is investment or whether it is elective medical procedure or whatever, right, is some downside risk and some upside potential. So those of you who are dating, even there's an upside potential and downside risk. So sometimes the power is in the zeroth assumption, how you view the. So I feel that this happiness seismogram, this poor thing we didn't talk about much, it is just there, is a good way to think about it. Because that's the zeroth assumption. If we think about that, we don't have to literally plot it, then the answer becomes very simple, that you should try to do things, make decisions which improve the positive and reduce the negative. It is as simple as that. So I want to leave you with this Native American legend. Again, you might have heard about it. An old Cherokee is teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside me, he says to the boy. It is a terrible fight between two wolves. One is evil, he is anger, envy, greed, guilt, and false pride. The other is good, he is joy, peace, love, hope, and kindness. The grandson thinks about this for a minute and then asks, which wolf will win? The old Cherokee replies simply, the one you feed. So I hope you choose to feed the one that represents compassion and love. That's the way to be happy. Thank you.
There's time for a few questions. Thank you very much. Are there, and I should point out that there's other opportunities because we're blessed that Professor Sarin will be here throughout the spring and at the start of the summer as well. So if you don't have a chance to ask your question at the reception this afternoon, there should be other opportunities through the quarter. Does anybody have any questions?
Or comment?
Can happiness be considered a journey rather than a destination?
Yes, yes, yes. I totally agree. Yes, it is a journey.
So, but how does that factor into your equations?
Because the way it factors in is, if you think about it, we have a quote from Robert Hastings' poem where he talks about, so it's not getting somewhere, like I was talking of cumulative good, so you have a goal, so goal may be whatever, and then as you are progressing toward goals, you are getting happiness. Think about it, when you reach the goal, happiness drops to zero. At that point, you have to find some other goal, because so if it was only in the goal, then you should have found a big jump. Actually, at that point, because even cumulative goods expectations increase, right? As I'm building the cathedral, but once cathedral is built, it's gone. It was in the process. Yes, so I agree with you. Mm-hmm. It is in the process. It is not the end. Uh-huh.
Rakesh, how do you relate this to Seligman's positive psychology?
Yeah, so I think we derive, so okay, our approach for those of you who do not know is rooted in decision analysis as management science, but we get information from positive psychology, from economics, from philosophy, from religion, and ancient wisdom. So we have tried to use all of those in the formulation of these laws. So Seligman's positive psychology is very influential because happiness seismogram is our reflecting our emotions, right? Yeah. Uh-huh.
This is really terrific, and I'm thinking as an educator, how do we, there are lots of really interesting ways in which we can apply this in our classrooms as educators. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? To make our classroom settings make our students happier by the way that we teach.
I didn't think about that, but you can reflect what, yeah. I see, the thing is that happiness is not to be viewed as like all the time you want to. Sometimes you make investment. When you are like a child learning piano, that is difficult. But that's why I said you have to look at a longer period. So sometimes with the students, I feel like they ought to be working hard and pulling an all-nighter. I did. So some level of stress is good, yeah. But I think you mean something else. But
they're learning in a bigger context. Yeah. I mean, there are lots of things you bring up here that actually we can start applying in our classrooms, even tomorrow, by providing even the crescendo, sort of giving them rewards in certain ways.
Right. Yeah, I haven't thought about that. Yeah.
Start off boring and then get more excited.
Right.
Can you talk
talk about how uncertainty relates to this? Because
Yeah,
I
that's
think
right. That's a really open research question. We don't know. That's right. So this crescendo thing, I think you are catching the right thing. This less to more only works like you have a budget of like 100 coins. But I don't know how long will I live. There is an uncertainty about it, right? So it's a fixed allocation of that. That's why I said we are just scratching the surface. Uncertainty is not part of it. What will it do if you were to ask me to guess, and if you are risk averse, maybe it, say without any uncertainty, it's steeper at some level. It may be less steep. I don't know, actually. I shouldn't even
I
guess.
think there's some research that shows that young people expect that they will get happier over time, but then on an absolute scale, younger people are much less happy than older people.
Right.
And so it may just be that there's a lot of uncertainty when you're young, and once you sort of resolve some of that uncertainty, you know what things are going to be like, even though your health is less.
Right.
You've resolved some of this.
But see, actually, first let's be clear about the result. So the result is, again, these surveys, remember this is a new field. So sometimes you will see a different answer. But the one that I know is it's a U shape. So younger people actually are very happy because they are optimistic and right. But you are right. Then at around 44, I don't know how they came up, it is the lowest because that's the time. And then it keeps increasing. The funny thing is, you put on a finger right thing. If health is there, I mean, it doesn't diminish. It's just 70-year-old is happier than 60, 80 is happier than 70, provided the health is, look, if you have a physical pain, you have a physical pain, right? It's difficult, but it keeps increasing then. So that's an interesting thing. Now, why, I don't know. See, data never tells you why. We can all sort of guess what is the reason, but...
Yeah, comment on uncertainty. So I heard a minister giving a sermon about a week ago, and he was lamenting, he had moved from Minnesota to Seattle, and then his wife had left him, and he was kind of sad about it. He was trying to sort of justify himself, and he said, I think those might have been good decisions, but they're not working out. And so afterwards, I told him about decisions versus outcomes. I said, look, when you're facing uncertainty, you can only make good decisions when the outcomes happen. And you're not responsible for those. And he got happy. I had a proofreader of an article Ron and I wrote come up to me saying I changed her life. Well, why did I change? Well, it was this little thing about decisions versus outcomes, and I think she was editing.
That's right.
So
no, I think that's a very important point. That's right, and people miss that. That's right.
Outcomes don't make you happy. Happiness is a decision variable.
Right.
So you don't need to optimize anything.
No. But the point is, in a decision variable, why am I choosing A over B? Because hopefully I'm thinking A will make me happier. So I need to know, why are you choosing A over B? You feel like it? Huh? You feel like it?
I personally think people are learning machines, and most of their pleasure,
Yeah.
use that instead of happiness, comes from learning something, whether it's the piano, skiing, fishing.
Sure, because it's a cumulative good. But the point is, you said decision making. If I'm choosing A over B, that's because I feel that A would make me happier than B, so I need to know. Well, okay, you can use some other word, but point is, you are choosing A over B, you have some other criterion in mind.
Yeah, but that's not happiness.
Well, okay, so you can label it, yeah.
Another thing that happened, and I'm not particularly religious, but this particular church, I know a guy who died last week.
Yeah.
And he had a disease for 10 years that crippled him. He was bent over, could hardly do anything. He's one of the happiest guys in the world. He just loved talking. He loved meeting people, being in groups. And he wasn't unhappy. He was having a very bad outcome. He tells you it's a bad outcome.
Right.
But he was still happy.
Right. See, but I won't be...
Semantic.
No. So you can be happy in any circumstance. That's my Maasai who are living in huts. They are happier, not happier, but about the same as happy as American millionaires, right? But why? Is because of this adaptation. So we need to know how this happiness functions. And even for decision making, why do we choose A over? I think ultimately is because we believe that A will make us happy. Now you may use a different word. I know we interchangeably use all these words, but the idea is to improve the life status. Why do I pick, if I just graduated like some of the students, they'll pick job A over job B because they will have a more fulfilling life, a better research career or whatever, which will make them happy. So I think it is hard to avoid. Actually, I'll argue just the other way, that all subordinate goals, you say I choose A over B because I'll be healthier. I say, why healthier then? Aristotle argued it well. All subordinate goals lead to happiness. So I think happiness is important.
Well, we're low over time. There are two questions. People have been waiting to ask questions. So do you want to ask your? This would be
I
the
think
last
we're over
question.
time. Maybe we should just
Go
let's go
ahead.
play.
Go ahead.
No, let's go play.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.